Good afternoon, everyone. Let's talk for a few minutes about the future of identity. I want to start off with something that probably a term that none of you have seen today, the Internet of Things, right? Have we heard this topic a few times already today? The answer is yes. But what I want to do for the next few minutes is I want to take you through a journey of a specific industry and what it looks like, not just the things that are connected in their industry, but also the people, the customers, and even the employees in some cases. And that industry is the automotive industry, and we're going to talk about cars for a little while today. And why cars, right? Cars are pretty interesting, but first of all, cars are cool, right? I mean, if you think about a car, not only is it a piece of operational technology that is running and moving, it's got hundreds of different sensors in it, and it's connected to many different computers. It has its own network inside of this vehicle, and at the same time, you can get in it, and you can drive it. It can take you places in style, with sport, and with speed, and safety. And all these things come together, and that's before you even add the I for Internet of Things. That's before this car is even connected to the internet, right? So we think of cars, and many of us who like to drive, we're passionate about cars, we get excited. You might say to me, Ashley, I don't care about driving. I'm more interested in autonomous cars. I want to get in a car of the future and just be driven around. So there I am. I'm on my way home from work, and my commute. I just want to take my hands off the wheel and kick back. Maybe I'll answer a few emails, but then I'm going to catch up on my favorite Netflix episodes, and I'm just going to relax until I get off the highway and I put my hands back on the wheel, and I'm ready to go home. So the future of identity is tied up in this as well, and we're going to talk about this. Of course, autonomous driving, self-driving cars. And maybe you don't see yourself dressed like these guys in the back of the car, and you say, I want to be a little bit more practical, right? So maybe you're going to be in one of these, okay? So the range is pretty broad, but the point is that even the passion for driving, the coolness of self-driving cars, whether it's a little Uber like this or some fancy Bentley that you're going to ride in, we have to remember that the stakes are still high because you're sitting in something that can still do this. And this is something that we can cause by how we drive, but once this vehicle is connected, that type of thing can be caused by breaches. So security and privacy are also critical issues in the connected car space. And so the journey we're going to go on now is going to look at where is the automotive industry going, what's their future, and how does the future of identity in this particular use case align with that. And you'll kind of see how where we're going aligns with this one particular industry vertical, but it can be applied to many, many others. So the great thing about presenting here today is the view. I can see the Opera House from here, and it's actually, there's a little bit of more sunlight coming out, and so it's really beautiful, and I put that in this background because I want to summarize a lot of the different points that we've talked about today, and then apply them into the automotive industry. So, obviously, business value, customer focus, user experience, these are things that we've talked about and we've heard throughout the different talks today. That's important. That's part of digital transformation. That's part of customer identity and access management. Also very important to those are trust, security, and privacy. And then, of course, we've talked about Internet of Things and identity's evolving role. So now let's look for a few minutes at the business of the automotive industry and how they're being disrupted and how they're transforming and how identity is going to be a key part of that. So this question, how clearly do you see your customers? This question evokes a digital transformation type of answer, right? And the automotive industry has not seen their customers very clearly up until this point. They've been missed the first, second, and third digital transformation buses, if you will. We've seen great success in insurance and financial services and retail. They're growing, they're going through this. But the automotive industry for a long time has been focused on how many units can we sell, maybe some warranty information, and then can we sell you more units in the future, right? So the thing that's disrupting the automotive industry is this term called new mobility, okay? This is from, I think, a Detroit Free Press article a few months ago. So new mobility, what does that mean? The way that I've defined it here is 4 different pieces, right? The first thing is about connectivity. Once that vehicle changes from an operational technology ecosystem that's rolling to an IoT ecosystem, everything's connected, everything else can change because now it's a node on the internet. Sharing is the second big thing, right? So vehicle sharing, ride sharing, the whole sharing economy, the as-a-service piece being applied to the automotive industry. Of course, autonomous, we talked about that. That's one of the most written about and reported news pieces about cars is how that's happening. But the thing that ties it all together is the monetization of the services through the vehicle. And we've seen another industry that has had this parallel. You saw this from Mike this morning, but just as a reminder, the executives of the automotive industry, they understand at 85% that the revenues that they're going to be able to generate through the vehicle are going to even exceed, or they're going to be more important than the revenues that they're going to have from selling the vehicles. Same thing about being able to own the experience, the operating system inside of the car, to be able to own the data, which is gold, and not have the third parties like Apple and Google. They don't want them to own the data, right? So essentially, the connected car is kind of taking on some of the smartphone capabilities, and we often hear the car referred to as a smartphone on wheels, but it's so much more than that. Still, there's some comparisons to what the smartphone industry has gone through that I think really help us determine the future of the automotive industry and where identity is taking us. So this was about 3 months ago, I think, an article from TechCrunch about how Apple's revenue business grew at 18%, while the sales of their actual units slumped. So what's the idea here is that even Apple, as selling devices, whether you have an Apple or a Google phone, a smart device, they're actually making more money on the services that they're selling you through their platform, whether getting a piece of music, apps, wallet, whatever, than they are selling the units. But what's something else that Apple did that made things really good for customers and their experience? What about Apple ID? What about the fact that you can go to iCloud.com, you can enter your Apple ID into your iPhone, your iPad, and get a common experience across those different devices? Your photos synced, your contacts synced. That phone becomes you, it becomes yours based on your Apple ID. So they added identity. So you can probably see where this is going with the automotive industry, because if you think of the vehicle as being a smartphone on wheels, it's so much more than that, but still, if you can apply identity into the vehicle in a lot of different ways, this is transformative for the automotive industry. So let's step back for a second and in the identity world, the way that we talk about things. We know that there's the traditional identity and access management for your employees, your contractors. We've talked a lot today about customer identity and access management, and of course, Internet of Things. This is our landscape, kind of our world, the way that we talk about it. But now let's take these things and break them down into all of the different types of identities that the automotive industry is going to have to manage when they are in their future with us as part of their future and identity. So of course, people, right? It's customers, it's maintainers, it's drivers, it's renters, it's dealer folks, it's the repair shops, all those different identities. The vehicle identities itself, whether it's the VIN code, whatever that unique identity is that represents the car as that single ecosystem. Let's not forget about cloud services, secure over-the-air updates, pushing software updates to the car, the vehicle sending data to the cloud, needing the identity and trust of those cloud services between the vehicle. Now we're starting to get into some IoT land here. We've got all these different devices and sensors in the cars. You might think of them as constrained devices, whether it's an airflow sensor or a tire pressure sensor or an anti-lock brake sensor connected up to different ECUs in the car, body control, autonomous driving getting even more advanced. All of these things need to talk to each other in a trusted way so that they're not causing the havoc of some kind of rollover crash like we saw a few minutes ago. What about software? Yes, identity of software and signed software so that you know that each different piece and part of the software that's in the car is trusted, it's where it's supposed to be, it's with the right types of hardware so that we can actually be authorized, if you will, to enter an autonomous driving mode. Everything's in its place. That piece of software is the right version, it hasn't been changed or hacked. And that's before we get into the vehicle actually talking to everything else out there in the infrastructure. Whether that vehicle is sending a trusted signal to another vehicle about a problem ahead, or whether it's the vehicle talking to a parking garage, or whether it's the vehicle talking to a traffic light. We talked a lot about relationships today, so guess what? The real value is going to come when you tie in all these relationships between all these different pieces and parts. They're going to need to know how they fit together in order to have a lot of customer insights, in order to make instant decisions. But this is just the abstract model. How it really looks is more like this, but this is even only still the tip of the iceberg. And these relationships, they're not static, they're dynamic, they're contextual, and these relationships have to be changing constantly as the environment around the vehicle and the people who are authorized to drive it and how it's driving. And as every one of these relationships changes, the answers come back change from a safety perspective, from a privacy perspective, from a who's driving and how fast they're allowed to go, and what information did they agree to share with their insurance company, a car that they are just renting for a day or a week, or a car that they own. The complexity of the relationships grows exponentially. So now let's take those pieces that we talked about, the themes that we've discussed today, and put them into the automotive context. So we've got digital identities and business value and customer focus as kind of a triangle that is enabling new things for the customers of an auto OEM, like personalization in the car. Why shouldn't I be able to authenticate myself to a device, in this case of car, so it knows that I'm in the driver's seat, it knows who I am at a strong level of authentication. I never typed anything to the dash, I talked to it, as we heard today with the demos. Maybe I looked in the rearview mirror. It knows who I am, and now that lights up a whole bunch of other things. So customer focus, personalization, right? What about the trust, security, and privacy aspect? I've got to trust if I'm going to let that car drive me around with my hands off the wheel or with no steering wheel. I don't know about that one. I need to trust that the data that I've said about how I'm driving and where I'm driving and when I'm driving is only shared with who I said I would share it with, and that it's not just everything is going everywhere, and I've got no control over that. Security, right? These pieces all come together in the in-car experience and my whole experience with the automotive manufacturer. And they work together. So what about monetization? We talked about how is the automotive industry going to monetize those relationships, right? So first of all, they can monetize connectivity. And maybe you can actually use your existing mobile phone account once you authenticate to not have to pay for a separate data plan from a separate provider so that your car is connected. Payments, we've kind of hit on that already in different sessions today. Features, as a service features. The car itself mechanically is capable of 500 horsepower. When I get in it and start it up and authenticate, then I get 300 because that's what I paid for. That kind of stuff is coming. What about brokering features through the vehicle so that when I get in, automatically my Spotify playlist comes in, my SiriusXM subscription pops into the vehicle, even if it's one that I'm just renting for a day. Entertainment options, insurance, usage-based insurance, advertising. All of these are essentially industries that are going to be cross-federating, if you will, with the automotive industry. So here again, we just talked about GDPR, the ability to control where a user's data is going across all these industries, just focused on the vehicle itself or the vehicles within an OEM situation, very powerful. From the user's experience point, they care about connectivity and personalization as well. They want services, right, that they'd probably be willing to pay for. Autonomy, privacy controls, sharing. These are all things that are going to impact the user experience and which manufacturer they choose to adopt in their ecosystem, not just because it's a reliable brand or it's one that's known, but it's a brand that gives them the best experience across everything that they're working with. So what is ForgeRock doing right now for the future of identity in this area? Well, in short, we're moving our capabilities out to the edge, and we started doing that with automotive-grade Linux that Mike talked about a little bit earlier. So automotive-grade Linux is an organization of the Linux Foundation, and their whole charter is to make a secure baseline that all the different auto OEMs can use as their operating system in the vehicle, starting off with infotainment. So what we've done is we've essentially become the identity layer for AGL as a starting point. These are some of the top-line OEM brands who are premier members of AGL. AGL has about over 100 members now of automotive OEMs, tier 1 suppliers, and the like. So here's what we've done so far. We've created basically a standards-based identity agent that runs in the vehicle, in the infotainment system, on AGL, so that the user can then authenticate to the car after going through and doing profile management. So we talk about progressive profile management, right? Once I buy a car, I want to be able to go out online to my phone app or in a web browser, and I want to be able to select my language preference globally, things that I want to select preferences for specific cars. I want to associate my payment methods to the vehicles. I want to associate my Spotify account and my SiriusXM. I want to be able to share my car with someone else and say that my son or daughter can only drive, 60 miles an hour or less than 100 kilometers, all those different kind of things I can do there with the ForgeRock platform as a backend But then when I want to authenticate to the car and it's 6 stories below in a parking garage, I can still do that because we've got authentication software running in the car. And you've already paired yourself to the car, and once the car can talk to the cloud again, well, then it'll be updated with whatever the latest information is. So we've built this. And we're also, Mike and Daniel talked a little bit earlier about our edge security. This little box over here, the Identity Edge Controller, well, that's about the security and trust of the vehicle itself. Remember we said vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to infrastructure? So in order for that car to be a trusted node online and to send a message and you say, I know it came from this car, this is a car that has a level of trust that I can accept so that I can go make a decision or I can go do something based on the message from that car, we're establishing the ability to have the root of trust of that car so that it can be a trusted node on the internet. And that's a way that we're applying edge security to the automotive industry. Okay, so that's cars, but that's also just the tip of the iceberg because there's all kinds of other vehicles out there that this could apply to. This can apply to fleet management, police officers, truck drivers, people who are using different vehicles and being able to authenticate to them, have their profile come down, have the way and where they're driving be tracked. And it also can apply to these little guys right here. The drones, right? These things buzzing around. So do drones need identity? Yeah, they kind of do, right? Because if you think about it, we had a meeting about 4 to 6 months ago with NASA back in San Francisco, and the Federal Aviation Administration, they're working together on this project to say, how can we get the identities to all these drones so we can authorize where they're allowed to fly and what different airspaces, at what altitudes, at what different times. And so we've got the FAA talking to us and NASA talking about OAuth capabilities for drones and authorization. So you think about an interesting dynamic, and this is another little piece of their architecture. At any one time when drones are authorized to fly in whatever area they are, and they're talking back home, what about when there's an emergency situation and there needs to be a rescue helicopter fly through and you've got, 50 drones in the area doing all the things that they're doing back here on this picture, taking pictures, agricultural, rail inspection, Amazon's delivering, your new iPhone. But all of a sudden they need to move out of the way so that this rescue vehicle can come in. Suddenly, all those relationships, 1 or 2 lines in those relationships might change, and all of them are suddenly aware that their authorization to be in this space has changed and they got to back out because the space here that they've been flying in has suddenly been changed to a no-fly zone for a certain amount of time. So drones need identity too. But it's not just these little drones. I did a little research and you find some interesting things. What about this Nautilus startup which wants to take 777-sized drones without pilots and land them and take them off from seaport to seaport to move cargo around in a way that's faster than a cargo ship, obviously, and cheaper than putting it in the belly of a passenger plane? Well, I think we want to have trust in that thing if it's flying without any pilots, that it's known, it's trusted, and it's only flying where it's authorized to fly, right? But if that's not personal enough, maybe you want to climb into one of these bad boys. Yeah, just jump in there with your smartphone and just tell it where you want to go. And I don't know, how high do you want to go? How high are you comfortable in flying with one of these things? That high? That high? I don't know. I fly, but I don't know if I'm going to go in one of those things. So identity is needed across all of these different areas. So now let's bring it back and let's take a customer journey with an OEM, an auto OEM, to talk about how all the pieces we just talked about can affect their journey from end to end with the future of identity and the future of the automotive OEM's business converging at the same point as we work together. So along the bottom here, we see the ForgeRock one platform, one delightful identity-driven experience. Remember we talked about this a little bit earlier. We've got the 3 different pieces of the identity landscape. So let's build that out in a real-world scenario. Now, I'm going to talk about General Motors as an example because I'm proudly representing the Midwest. I'm from Michigan and they're still in Detroit. So let's talk about GM. So here's Lisa. Lisa Jones is an employee of General Motors. And so General Motors wants to manage her identity. They need some basic enterprise identity management. They need to synchronize with HR systems and provision email accounts and provide single sign-on and federation and all that kind of good stuff. We'll make the connection down there. ForgeRock platform does that. Now let's take them out into their customer and devices scenarios. Well, here's Lisa Jones again. Now she's a customer. She's so happy with GM and working there, she wants to buy GM vehicles. So what's the first thing that she does? As we heard earlier today, she probably goes online and starts building her dream car before she ever goes into a dealership. And when she does that, she uses some sort of social capability, or maybe just gives them her email so they can start a progressive profile, make it easy, low friction for her, so that when she then decides to buy the car and she comes into the dealer, they already know some information about her, and they can give her a seamless, easy experience, so that when she walks out of the dealer, she never had to get a password to sign into their website. She got her cell phone registered, and she's got push authentication, and it's fine-grained authentication, as we heard about earlier. And so when she wants to go and sign in and manage her profile, she can do that quite easily. She's got a great experience. So that's the beginnings of customer identity and access management. But now we want to move on to being able to manage a profile. So we talked about this. We want to be able to connect payment information, Spotify accounts, all these other things that are going to actually ultimately change how her experience is in the vehicle. So she can do basically cloud-based profile management, again, with the ForgeRock platform. So let's connect that down. What about services? So GM owns a service called Maven. It's a vehicle as a service platform where you can sign up, you can subscribe, you can get a Suburban for a week, you can get a Cadillac, what have you. So they also have an investment in Lyft, which is an American company kind of like Uber, which is great. I've used it many times. They want to make sure that her authentication experience and how she interacts with these services that they're a part of uses the same login ID, uses the same easy methods, has all of the information about her connected through, so that not only does she get a great experience with these brands, but she also gets a great experience with how the things that they know about her there give her a better experience across in the vehicles that she owns. So we connect that down. And now it comes to the really fun part. Once she's in the vehicle. So Lisa has 2 vehicles from GM. She bought a Cadillac for a daily driver. She's got a convertible Corvette for the weekends and just for fun. And then sometimes she uses her Maven subscription when she's got to take a whole bunch of people around. She's got a Suburban. Doesn't matter which one she's driving, because when she gets in and she authenticates to their new infotainment system by either saying, "Hi, it's me, Lisa," or a FIDO flow where she does that as the first part, and then her phone buzzes, she puts her finger down, she looks in the rearview mirror, she never has to type in a username and password. She has a great experience authenticating, and she gets the same single sign-on user experience, whether she's in that Suburban or in that Cadillac or in that Corvette, because she managed it all over here in her online profile management and in her services. And by the way, the relationship to the dealer that she bought the vehicle from is all interconnected. So if there's predictive maintenance on any one of those vehicles, it knows what her preferred dealer is and what her times are, when she's got meetings, when she's available. The integrations go on and on. Connect this down to the platform, and she's had a wonderful experience. And this would be a huge differentiator for any automotive OEM as they move towards their future, and as identity, the future of identity, moves there with them. So the bottom line is, then you ask the question, how clearly can you see your customers? Comes into focus like this. And that clarity is where the value is, and that's where the future of identity is taking us. So the road ahead is bright for identity, and it's going to be good. We're going to have great things ahead. This is just one example of the automotive industry. I think another part of the future of identity is taking where we're going and taking things like IoT and devices and getting into these use cases of all these different industries. And when we speak the language of the industry, we understand how it impacts their business, the sky's the limit. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great day.